Well, today, this scripture, this passage is every wedding everywhere.
1 Corinthians 13, it's all about the love.
Love, love.
He's Chris. I'm Jeff. We're the Bible
Love,
guys.
love.
Okay, Chris.
Yes.
Every time the word love is in a title, you yell, love, love.
Love, love.
Yep.
It's,
Okay.
it's a phrase.
Is
you
it?
know? Yeah, it's like a motto. You're like, hey, love, love.
That's your motto?
Well,
That's your slogan?
Believe it or not, yes. You know what? You know what it stems from? My best friend Jeff Miller, and he always tries to. When he encourages me to be nice to people, you know, it's like a philosophy. He's like, no, no, no. When it comes to this guy, love, 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 love.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Not this Jeff, that Jeff.
Right.
The other Jeff.
Well, this is one of my favorite segments because it's sophisticated humor that is written so well, and it's the Babylon Bee.
That's right. This is where we get our best news from.
Yes.
That's right. So if you don't know, the Babylon Bee is a satire website.
Yes.
For some reason, several mainstream news organizations have misquoted or accidentally quoted them thinking it was true news. It's not, but it's always funny. So here's the title. The headline says, "Kind, gentle father turns into merciless bully during family game of Mario Kart."
Great.
Mario Kart's a Nintendo family game. According to sources, a kindly middle-aged father began bullying his family during a casual game of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe this week. Police were called to the scene after a neighbor became distressed over the sound of wailing and gnashing of teeth coming from the family's home. The man, who authorities identified as Peter Ling, reportedly toyed with family members by purposely falling behind so he could lob blue shells at them. He would then rocket to the finish and laugh maniacally, his children claimed. Ugh. "Dad, you're so annoying," young Timothy reportedly said. "Just play normal." "Whatever, Toad," Mr. Ling would say, mocking whoever complained by referring to them by their character's name. According to the sources, Peter's wife grew upset with her husband by the end of the third race. "Peter, you're taking this too seriously." "Out of the way, Daisy." Little Betsy began crying when her father, playing as Wario, fired 3 red shells at her in quick succession. The 5-year-old girl, who'd by then been lapped twice, watched her cart spin out and fly off the road into the liquid hot magma of Grumble Volcano. "Daddy, please. Hot enough for you, Peach?" Officials broke up the family match and talked to Peter Ling outside, where they advised him to cool off before things got out of hand. At publishing time, Eden Ling, the wife, set up parental controls on their Nintendo Switch to restrict her husband's playing time.
That's really funny. Yeah.
I think it's funny that the cops had to take him outside and talk to him about playing nice.
Hey, have you ever played Mario Kart?
Oh, yeah, we play it all the time.
Yeah.
It's like the favorite game at home.
Oh yeah, it's really
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and it really does get heated, which
it does.
which is what
Yeah.
makes that article all
And
the funnier.
my wife and my daughter are way better at it than I am. I think my grandson is better at it than I am.
Well, my kids destroy me.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that when I join a race, there is no chance I'm going to win.
It's
None.
so funny.
Yeah.
So funny.
My wife didn't even try.
So, yesterday,
Yesterday,
we were finishing up talking about spiritual gifts. The
Yesterday.
beginning of it, yes. You always have a song. That's why I like you. So he says, so you should honestly desire the most helpful gifts. Remember, we were talking about,
Yes.
we kind of can get distracted by the cool gifts or the surprising gifts.
yeah,
But he says, really what you need and pray for is that God give you useful gifts, the gifts that make a difference in everyday lives. And he says, but now let me show you a way of life that is better than all. And then he moves into chapter 13.
Hey, I like what you said right before we started recording. You said a lot of people, what they do is, you sort of hear this passage at weddings.
Yeah.
Love is patient, love is kind. I could quote the whole thing, right? But what you're saying is like, think about the context of when this was written.
Yeah.
I mean, it's written between two arguments, right? Paul never takes a breath. It wasn't divided into chapters, right? So
there were no chapters and verses back then, right?
that's right.
We've added those just to be able to help figure out where we are at in the Bible. But so he doesn't even take a breath. He says, but now let me show you a way of life that is best of all. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would only be a noising gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains but didn't love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I'd have gained nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up. Love never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now, our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. When I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. And now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete. But then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And then he doesn't stop there either. He moves on to chapter 14 and says, so let love be your highest goal. And he goes on. He never stops talking about how we behave among other Christians. He never stops talking about spiritual gifts. He's just saying, you used to brag, I think, chapter 12, he's saying, there's a struggle. You think that there's cool gifts and uncool gifts. There's powerful gifts and not powerful gifts. And he said, it's because you think they're for you, but they're supposed to be for everybody else. Right. And then he spends this entire 13 verses talking about you should be living all of these gifts for the benefit of others because of love.
Yeah. And by the way, I've done this, I don't know how many weddings you've done. I've done at least a couple hundred or so. And you know, I always say, like, we may never be able to fulfill the true definition of love, because this is really the true, this is the agape love in the Greek, which is selfless. It is, the Greek word means, you know, unconditional. It's defined that way, and sacrificial, you know, those kind of words. And but I always look at the bride, and I always say, like, listen, it says love never gets angry. I always look at the bride, and I say, when it comes to the groom, good luck with that. But then the next verse says, love keeps no record of wrongs. I always look at the groom and point at the bride and say, good luck with that.
That's true.
Right? Because we're going to fall short of love.
But that doesn't let us off the hook.
No,
that's what we should always be aspiring towards.
Right.
And any behavior apart from that is wrong and is unloving.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love, he says, I love when he says, you know, I can speak in multiple languages, but if I don't have love, it's like a clanging cymbal or a gong. And I remember a pastor one time said, think about tripping into a drum set. You trip into a drum set. He said, that's what it sounds like. That's what he's saying. He's saying, like, you know, it's about as useless as that, because love
it's just noise.
Is the key ingredient. Right. It's just noise.
This is one of the things I think a lot of times we get so worked up about saying the right things the right way, but the listener doesn't hear our love in our words.
Right.
We should be every bit as concerned that the person knows we love them, even while we're trying to tell them the truth, right? Those 2 things have to go together. Otherwise, it just sounds like noise. It's just words. It's just aggravating, right? That's the clanging cymbal thing.
Right.
He goes on and he says, if I had the gift of prophecy, hey, so these supernatural languages, which, by the way, just to point you back, when he's talking about unknown languages, most of the time, that's talking about the kind of languages that were in Acts chapter 2. Remember when the Holy Spirit came down like a mighty rushing wind and there were flames of fire over the head? Then they go out in the streets to preach, and all the apostles are preaching, and it mentions 13 different languages they're preaching in. And then everybody was amazed. These guys must be drunk. They're a bunch of Galileans. They're uneducated men. How in the world are they teaching with all these different languages? It was very clear that they were speaking languages that they did not know, but other people were hearing the gospel in their own language. This was the thing. So what a powerful gift, right? If you could come up to some stranger from Thailand and you don't speak Thai at all, and you're able to share the gospel and they hear the gospel in Thai, that's a pretty extravagant gift.
You've actually heard stories that this has happened.
Oh, sure. Yeah, many times. I've heard many people talk about, you know, in a missionary kind of circumstance or in a cross-cultural circumstance, all around the world, where people said, I didn't speak the local language, but I just felt compelled, like God told me to go share the gospel with them. And I sat down and in my own language began to share the gospel, but the people heard it in their language. So I've heard that many times. I've had multiple friends tell me that God did that for them. They normally wouldn't say I have the gift of tongues, but in that moment, it was the only way those people were going to hear the gospel. Right? And so that's what God did. He did a miracle there. So that's pretty flashy. That's a flashy miracle. Or healing is a pretty flashy miracle. Or the other one, if I had the gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, if I had such faith that I could move mountains, those are pretty flashy.
Yeah.
But he says, but I didn't love others, I would be nothing. He doesn't say I would miss the mark. He doesn't say I just wouldn't be all I could be. He says I get a 0 on my scorecard.
Right.
I have faith to move mountains.
Right.
But if I don't show love with my spiritual gifts, I get a 0 on the scorecard. Hey, it's pretty impressive to move a mountain, I would think.
You know what's interesting is, I would think so
But
too.
you get a 0 on the scorecard for not being a loving person.
Jesus said, "This is a new commandment that I give to you: love one another."
Right.
And it's like, what? How could that possibly be
It's a new one. Yeah.
How could that be new?
Yeah.
And yet, then he also says that this is how they will know that you're my disciples. If you love one another, they'll know you by your love for one another.
Yeah.
So Jesus commands this, and it becomes the new theme of the New Testament. And it even goes as far as to say, love your enemies, love those who persecute you, right?
Right.
Love is it. And then Paul is reaffirming this, basically thrown down by Jesus, reaffirmed by the Apostle Paul here. And he says, you'll have nothing. And I always think of the people who, when they try their best to be godly or give godly advice or act within the church, and those people, just like you said, if they don't have love, I have a question for those people. And that is, do you just want to make a point, or do you actually want to make a difference in someone's life?
Right. Exactly.
Right? Because there are plenty of people out there, all they really want to do is be right.
Right.
And they want to prove a point.
They just want to slam dunk on you all the time.
Or make a point.
That's right.
And there are people, those are the kind of people who have a bunch of knowledge, who have a bunch of, normally it's complaining or, judging or whatever. But a lot of times it's not that way. It's not so negative.
Yeah, right.
Some people can disguise it. It's not like a rah, rah, rah. It doesn't have to be a judging thing.
Right.
It could just be more like a corrective thing, but then if they don't feel love, let me.
Yeah.
I'm sort of rambling, but let me tell you what I'm really thinking of. I went to Cuba, and there was this lady in Cuba who was sort of disenfranchised with the local church in Cuba because her family was struggling in some sinful things, and I'm not going to mention what they were, but anyway, they were being sort of told by the church leaders that this was sinful. And it's a really big deal. And if I got into it, it would be a whole different can of worms. But basically, it was a pretty familiar scenario. And then I looked at her and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Did you feel like it was given in love?" She said, "Absolutely not." And I said, "So you didn't feel loved by the church? You didn't feel loved by your family?" She said, "No, absolutely not. I felt condemned. I felt shamed. I felt excommunicated. I felt unwanted. I felt unworthy. And she started listing all the things that she felt. And Cuba is so far in culture, it feels like it's the 1950s,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It feels like it's just like,
Right.
The church has a lot to learn, by making mistakes. And I feel like that's sort of the phase that Cuba's in with things happening the way that they are. And I just remember thinking to myself, what a travesty. What an unbelievable, huge thing. Well, in Cuba, a Bible is pretty rare to have.
Right.
It's you have to save up all of your income for like 5 months in order to actually attain a Bible. And we had an extra Bible. And so I went all the way to this warehouse, grabbed a Bible, and knocked on this lady's door, and she started crying. And I said, as a pastor, I'm not your pastor, but as a pastor, I wanted you to know the church loves you. You are valued, even in your struggles.
Right.
And she was crying and said, "Thank you for the Bible." She said, para mí. And she started crying. It was a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's so important that love is at the core. Now, not every word we say is going to feel loving. If the person is demanding that you co-sign their sin,
Right.
and that you just allow it and reward them for doing the wrong thing, the Bible tells us we can't do that.
Right.
I need to express as clearly as I can, I love you more than anything, and I want what's best for you. I just can't agree with that issue.
Right.
They may not like those words, but we have to be working very, very hard, not just so that we're not trying to just prove our love with our words. We can prove our love through our actions far more than we can with our words. And so then he begins to unpack, what does it mean to love somebody, right? If I gave everything to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it. But if I didn't love others, I'd be gaining nothing. So there's the demonstrating of our love, and there's also the saying of our love. And then he starts to unpack it. Love is patient and kind. It's not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Doesn't demand its own way. It's not irritable. As I read through these lists, some of those are oh, I'm good at that one. Oh, I don't carry grudges. I don't, right? So the one I don't like is love is not irritable. So you and I are both in Myers-Briggs personality test. We're both ENTPs. And for ENTPs, we make up like 2% of the population, 2 or 3% of the population. And for us, of all the personality types, for us, debate is a sport, right? So, and the reason is we're not always, our personality type's not always more intelligent than everybody else, but we do tend to be very clever and very quick. So we're quick with our words, quick with our thoughts, very fast. And so sometimes we're just out ahead of everybody else. And so I find myself in irritable moments hurting people around me, and they have nothing, there's no response, right? And it's just me being irritable. And so I have had so many times when I realized I wounded my wife or my children, and then it was a bad day. I wasn't feeling good. Maybe I had a headache. It was a stressful day, whatever. I was just feeling irritable. Somebody cut me off on the way home, whatever. I'm just surrounded by dumb people. I'm feeling irritable. And I take it out on the people that are closest to me, people I should be demonstrating love to all the time. And I've had many, many times when I went back and said, I am so sorry that I was just being irritable. You deserve better from me. And I love you so much that I'm going to own what I did. And I want you to know, I know that you deserve better from me than me to be irritable. But I think every one of us, we can look through that list. For others, it might not be irritability. It might be holding grudges.
By the way, I'm glad you tried to lump me in with you, but, that doesn't happen to me ever. So
Yeah. You're making me irritable right now.
You need to go home and work on that.
Yeah. Doesn't rejoice about injustice. Keeps no record of being wronged.
Doesn't rejoice over the wickedness of others.
Doesn't demand its own way. Yeah, that's right. So we all have our own weakness when it comes to demonstrating love. And I think self-awareness is incredibly important. This is why, we talked about taking spiritual gifts tests. They're not infallible, but they help point us in the right direction. I think it's also useful for us to take some basic personality tests, like a Myers-Briggs or one of those, to find out why do we do what we do? Where are we? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? And I know in my own world, I can convince myself that I'm right because I can win most arguments. I might not be right, but because nobody can rebut me other than just crying, right? And I've been irritable enough at times where I've made people cry just for the satisfaction of it.
Listen.
And how horrible is that, right? So I don't want to be that person. And this passage is inspiration. I never feel judged by that passage. I feel inspired by it.
I just want to say this. I want to go on record and say, just because you're a strong person who could debate well does not mean you're the kind of person that doesn't concede or give in. I have seen you dozens and dozens of times. If I'm able to hang with you and actually finish the debate with you, which I am, you'll sort of talk it out with me, and you go, okay, I changed my mind. You convinced me.
Yeah.
And you'll change your mind on a dime.
Yeah.
And you'll give up your position because you're just like, yeah, thank you for debating with me, and I think I agree with you. And people, I just want to, I'm trying to give you a compliment here.
Sure.
I'm trying to say, like, you're not debating because you want your own way. You're just debating because you want to find out, what to decide something. And so I all that to say, I just want to speak well of you and say, I've seen you so many times just go, okay, you're right, and you'll change your mind, and you'll just surrender just like that, because it's not about being right with you.
I think that phrase, the more, hopefully, I'm 51, so hopefully I'm more spiritually mature than I used to be. I didn't used to be that guy, Chris. I used to be the jerk that just dig in and walk out of the room and just burn every bridge, right? I was that guy. But it says, love never gives up, right? That's one of them. It doesn't rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. I think I've grown into that, where, so there's, with regard to strengths, any kind of strength, spiritual gift, there's the good side and there's the dangerous side. So because I'm a sinner, even though I have a supernatural spiritual gift of wisdom or of leadership, there's also the dark, sinful side of me that can taint that. So if I know, if I have wisdom and discernment and leadership, I'm confident in my decision making. When I'm honoring God with my life, those things are a great benefit to the people around me. When I'm being self-centered, I am completely and totally confident that I am the smartest guy in the room, and I don't care what other people think, and I go after them and I hurt them, right? So I have to constantly be, and this is why he's talking about this, the love in the context of the Spirit, is I have to be surrendered to the Spirit and to His way and understand these are His gifts, not mine. He just loaned them to me. And then I need to make sure that I'm not being fleshly in the way that I'm demonstrating those. There are times when I do need to dig in and argue out a point because it's the right way to go, but I shouldn't be hurting people while I'm doing it, right? And so that phrase all the time, when I read this passage often, but it rejoices when the truth wins out. That's the most important thing. I think if we can do that in our marriage, if we can do that in our relationships, among our coworkers, like you said, you challenge me, and then at the end of the conversation, I'll go, you're right, pivot and go, because now that is the truth. I was thinking one way, you were thinking another way. I realize your way is the right way. Fine. I'm totally content in saying, I want the truth to win out, not me win out.
Right.
And I think that just requires age. Age brings a little bit of humility.
Right.
And then, maybe some spiritual maturity in that.
And it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt the fact that I'm wired like you, so I don't get offended.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. So I'm not going to back down just because because to me it's not I don't feel like you're powering up. You're just acting the way I would act.
But we need to walk into every relationship as open-handed, and this is true. So I'm saying these things because you and I are similar. We understand each other's personality types. A lot of people do a lot of destructive things in their marriages and in their relationships and their coworkers because they're not self-aware. Right. And so then when he gives all these things, he said, you know what? You're acting like a child. So many people not self-aware about their own spiritual gifts or about why they do what they do, the personality that God gave them. They act like children, and they don't act like what God is calling us to. So he finally ends it with 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. That's our goal.
Yeah.
Now he's going to pivot into spiritual gifts, particularly you mentioned speaking in tongues
and
he's going to
prophecy.
talk about order in the church and all those kind of things over the next couple verses.
So as we wrap up, just understand that entire passage of those 13 verses was actually the answer to Paul's prelude when he said, "But now let me show you a way of life that is best of all."
That's right.
So living this way is the best of all.
That's right.
So hopefully love permeates and overshadows and is prominent over every other characteristic that we have in our lives.
Right. And don't let this passage judge you or make you feel judged. Instead, let it be an inspiration to say, I can be that. Because God's Spirit is in you and He can help you be these things.
That's great.
Yep.
Well, that's a good place to end, and we'll pick up tomorrow on the Bible Guys.